I have been seeking enlightenment since the age of 14. That's when I consciously felt I had to find something which I called enlightenment. Don't ask me how that word came into my consciousness, but it was a strong desire that I had. And when I mentioned it to my parents, they were so surprised because they couldn't understand why I was looking for something like that when I had a very comfortable life that I was living. Now, as far as coming to Sahaja Yoga, I had actually begun my seeking consciously as an individual when I went to England to study. I'd left home, which was in Singapore, and in England, I began to read a lot of books, meet people with similar ideas, and I'd made a decision that after I completed my degree in aeronautical engineering and design, that I would go to India and find a guru. At the end of my studies, I went down to London to stay with a friend of mine who also was interested in enlightenment, and he was working at that time, and he gave me a magazine called Time Out, and he said to me, "Bala, there are lots of gurus in the back of this magazine." And I simply laughed and I said, you know, no real guru would advertise in the back of a magazine. Anyway, he went off to work. I was bored, so I started flipping through the back few pages of the magazine, and there were advertisements for gurus, and they even charged money. There were people who had an ad that said £100 for enlightenment over the weekend, and there were even some advanced classes for a fast track that cost £300. Eventually I saw a little ad, a small rectangular ad. The ad said, "Self-realization, this is your divine birthright. No money will be taken." And it gave a date, a time, and a location. And underneath it also said Nirmala Devi. So on that day, I took a bus and travelled by tube and walked to the location, which was Caxton Hall. And I walked in and saw a group of about perhaps 25 to 30 people. And I sat near the door on the right side of the hall, just in case I needed to make a quick exit if the program was not what I was expecting. On the stage, there was an Indian lady dressed in a sari, and on either side of her, there were some young people seated who I would have considered seekers because they looked like hippies. At the podium, there was a slightly older man speaking, and he was giving an introduction, I think, to Mataji Nirmala Devi, which was the name of the lady on the stage. And I began to feel that he wasn't very confident in what he was talking about, that he didn't really have a strong belief that it was real, and he was also getting rather boring because it was going on for a while. So I thought, okay, time to leave. And as though it happened in slow motion, a signal went from my brain to my legs, and I was preparing to stand up. And at that very moment, Mataji cut off this young man, or this middle-aged man, in mid-sentence. And she said, "Gavin, I'll speak now." So I remained seated. Looking back now, I just find it astonishing because a second, all it would have been taken would have been 1 second, and I would have left and never found out anything more or experienced all the marvelous things I've experienced over the past few decades. So the instant I was planning to leave, obviously, Masterji knew and decided that I needed to stay for my own benefit. So then she came up and she started talking, and she spoke about all the things that I had thought about, discussed with friends for most of my life, since the age of 14. And one interesting thing for those who have come to this meditation, this Sahaja Yoga of Sri Mataji later, is that at no time did she mention God. And it was appropriate because many of us who came in those early days had lost any interest in any religions, and some of us were not sure about this entity called God. In fact, I myself had concluded that God was simply a crutch that adults invented because they no longer had their parents to help them through difficult situations. So they created a concept of this God who could help you through your difficulties in life. She talked about enlightenment, about getting your self-realization, that is realizing your true self, which is not this body or mind, but something far more permanent. And also she talked about entering a state of awareness where you could look into the nature of things. And it reminded me of some of the poems by William Wordsworth. Towards the end of her talk, she said that we did not have to wait lifetimes to get this experience, that she was going to give it to us that very night. Now you can imagine my excitement, having been looking for something like this, and I began to think perhaps this was possible. Then Masterji came down from the stage, and in those days, of course, she worked on each person individually. So before she came down, she asked us to move to the left side of the hall. So about 20 people decided to stay behind. And I sat in the back row because I wasn't too sure I wanted to be in the front. Masterji came down and she stood in front of the first row, and she began to wave her hands at people, which we now call working on people. And suddenly she looked across all the people straight at me, and she turned to one of the persons with her and said, "He's got it, he's got it." And I was bewildered. I thought, what have I got? Then she went through each row and finally got to my row. She came straight up to me and said, "You've got it, you've got it. Do you feel the cool breeze?" And you were supposed to feel a cool breeze in your hands. So you held your hands like this, and apparently some breeze would flow into it. Now, I personally didn't think a breeze was necessary. If I wanted to be cool, I turned on the air conditioner or a fan. Then Masterji put a hand over my head and raised it up a couple of feet, I guess. And I was trying to look up at what she was doing. And she turned to the others and said, "He's got it, he's got it." And asked me again whether I felt any cool breeze, and I did not. Suddenly, the person sitting on my right began to go, "Whoa, I feel the cool breeze." And I thought, good grief, this is auto-suggestion. Next, the person to my left started getting excited and said that he felt the cool breeze. And I began to think this is, some kind of powerful mass suggestion or mass hypnosis, because I didn't feel anything. And then Masterji went on past the others, and the meeting was over. During that meeting, the very first time I met Sri Masterji, I experienced several emotions, numerous thoughts. one of the thoughts I had was, here was someone who was addressing all the things that had concerned me during my years of seeking, who actually believed that she could give me or lead me to this state of enlightenment. And one of the signs, she said, would be the cool breeze. So I was a little concerned because I did not feel the cool breeze. But one thing I remember distinctly was that during a talk, at one stage, she said, "I don't want anything from you. All I'm here for is to give you my love." And at that instant, I felt a churning in my heart. Now in Sahaja Yoga, people would call it the left heart. I felt that churning in my heart. So that was my initial and first experience when I met Srimati Nirmala Devi in London in 1977. Compared to the experiences I had later, that was like a grain of sand in all of the world and all the planets and all the material of all the galaxies. Thank you for watching.